All right.
All right. So I feel like in this conversation I'm more Jim Davis and you're more Pruitt. So what's your jokey introduction?
My jokey introduction is that I don't have a jokey introduction. I was supposed to write it down and I lost it on my way here, which was really funny because I was over there.
That's not much space.
I mean, I am ADHD. All I have to do is walk through a door and I'll forget about the thing that I'm thinking about.
What were we talking about?
I don't know. We're talking about who we are and what we're doing here. And we're
I
talking
don't.
about DMs and players, what it's like to become one or the other.
Okay. Well, let's start out with who are we? So who are you?
Hello, I am Inkblitz. I am a long-time player, not a very long-time DM. I've only been DMing for about. Has it been 2 years? My gosh, it's been 2 years. Year and a
I don't know.
half. Year
Yeah,
and a half.
probably more like a year and a half.
I've been a player for more like 15. So I've definitely a lot more of that under my belt. And who are you?
I am the Niche. I have been DMing in or game mastering in some capacity since 1981. And I've also written in the game industry, and I am an old school nerd.
I am a new
uh,
school nerd.
yep, yep. And I am the GM probably I'd say about 75 to 80% of the time.
Yeah, you were mostly
Uh,
the DM until I decided to start DMing.
yep, yeah. Well, I mean, I'm talking about for 40 years I've been the DM probably 80% of
I
the
feel
time.
like that's usually how it ends up. Is that someone ends up the DM for most of the time,
Yeah,
and then
it really
until they
does.
get tired, and it's like, you know what, I'm not doing this anymore. One of you have to play. One of you have to DM, and then suddenly,
Yeah, or
so,
you get lucky enough to be in a group with multiple DMs, and sometimes that is just a natural consequence, and sometimes that somebody has, like you, decided I'm going to be a DM for a while, and so yeah, so um, we're both we've both been doing D&D, but I mean that's just like touching the surface of who we are.
pretty much, like I've like D&D is just one of my many interests. Uh, I'm in many different fandoms. Sci-fi, fantasy, furry, sort of encompasses all of those. Writing, costuming, role playing for a long, long period of time, not just in D&D, but acting, voice acting, music somewhere along the line.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
you're definitely run the gambit in your own interests.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm most famous for my webcomics, which are
Mm-hmm.
furry webcomics. I've been guest of honor at various conventions, including, other countries. So,
It's called Roughhousing. Go check it out. It's a good web comic.
well, that one's kind of on hold, but we're working on that. But yeah, so D&D is like the most mainstream of my interests in its own weird way. I have done cosplay as I have a full-blown Ghostbuster uniform with the Mark IV proton pack from the video game. Not just an ordinary proton pack for
No,
me.
it
I
has
had
to
to
be the
go the crazy
precise
one.
one.
Yeah.
You gotta have the
Yep.
exact little sniggets here,
Yep.
little.
It's got the slime blower. It's got the particle thrower. It's got the little greeblies on the back that light up in different modes and stuff like that. So yeah.
Meanwhile, my costuming exploits are a little bit more fuzzy. You can see my head of my costume back there is even tied.
Yeah.
My sewing machine that I'm just starting to learn how to sew and figure out making my own costumes. But
So, but yeah. So
I didn't
the
make
the,
it. No,
the
I'm not.
whole
No.
idea for like this whole discussion, the whole videos, we just decided we talk about geeky stuff all the time, and we've had people express interest in wanting to like snoop in on our conversations, and
Yeah, apparently people like our opinions. We're not even sure why, But
Yeah.
they keep hearing about the things we're talking about, and suddenly it's like, well, we want to hear your thoughts on this. We want to understand your concept of what this all is.
Yeah. Yeah. So big disclaimer, we have no idea what we're doing.
Not a clue.
Yeah,
No.
we're just making it up as we go along.
I mean, that's 9 times out of 10 out of life in general, is
Yeah.
just making it up anyways, but we're making it up extra more.
Yeah. So, but I mean, it's not like we're not putting forth effort. We're not trying. We research all this stuff. We try and figure out as best as we can before we talk about it. But, at the end of the day, we're just making our best guess. So, but we're going to do our best. So let's dive into this. This is our sort of episode 0. It's our test case. It's not going to have super sound. It's not going to have fancy video.
Yeah, we fixed this live about 5 minutes ago, trying to get this window to work in the first place.
Yeah,
I cleaned my apartment for this.
Well, that's good. That's yeah. I mean, that's classy. So good on that. Yeah. So, and we're not going to have skits and things. I mean, eventually we might start doing crazy stuff, but for now we're very basic. But let's get into it. So we're going to talk about DMs versus players, because, like you say, you recently started being a DM for the group.
Right. I'm very much a newbie, and you have been DMing for pretty much longer than I've been alive.
Yeah, well, but the thing of it is that I almost never get to play, and so I very much feel like I'm a beginner as a player.
It's a really different. People don't really think about it, but it's a really different skill set from being a DM and being a player, because as you kind of put it to me earlier, you see the big picture as a DM, whereas as a player you see things through the straw that the DM chooses to show you this big picture.
Yeah, and it's a really different experience, and there's all kinds of factors. It's not just how you see the game, but it's also how you interact with the game, what your role in the game is. I guess the DM, you are the world, except for the little pieces that the players are.
Right.
When you're a player, you're you, and
you're just there.
Yeah.
I like to put it as the DM is kind of like the narrator in a book, where the narrator is telling you what's happening, but the characters are their own thing, or the players are the characters, and they're just doing their own thing, and the narrator is just between the characters and saying what everything else is happening, as opposed to what the main character is doing.
Yeah. So because one of us has to start, I will go ahead and start. So usually I'm the DM. Now I'm a player, and for me this has been it's been an enlightening experience. It's been sort of a frightening to discover, like, my capacity for getting tilted by the game.
Mm-hmm.
And my as a DM, I'm used to getting my way in the game, because if I decide rocks fall, everybody dies.
That's what happens. Everyone dies, or rocks have fallen, and everyone fails their saving throws, and they're just all dead. Then it's because you made the rocks fall. It's not that someone else. In this case, instead, someone else is doing this to you, or someone else is having this happen around you, and the dice screw you over. Which,
talking about the having control or not having control, we very famously had this episode early on where my character wanted to jump across a 10-foot thing, and I was like, the rules say you can jump this distance, and she has the strength score, so she's going to jump that distance. And you were like, okay, make an athletics check to land on the other end. And I was like, okay, well, I did that because you called for the roll, and she blew it because I can't roll dice. This is a well-known fact about me. I don't roll above a 3 on any kind of die.
It doesn't matter which kind of dice. I have seen this happen even on Roll20, which is digital dice. This happens. Yeah. I don't know why, but yes, he completely botched it. It was I was probably a little more than a 10 feet jump. It was like 15 and 20 feet. And
I don't remember. I remember figuring out that mechanically, just going
Mechanically,
by
she
the
should've-
rules in the book,
right.
yeah, she should be able to have cleared the distance. And you wanted her to make a roll to land, and she blew it and then sploosh in the water.
Right.
And so there was a couple of pieces for that for me where, I had feelings about the ruling, right? But you were the DM, I'm the player. So when you make a ruling, I have to abide by it.
Right.
I can say, well, how about this? And you can say, no, I want to do it this way, or yes, we'll do it that way. As a player, I have to abide by that. Okay. And then my character, who was, she was a Tabaxi swashbuckler. I imagined her bouncing all around like an anime character, right? And the first time she tried to bounce somewhere, she blew it.
Well, she was also
Right.
level 2 at the time.
Yeah, but the point is,
the bouncing
I'm
around
not
comes
arguing.
later.
I'm not
We're not
arguing the rule now. Okay, I'm not arguing the ruling now. I'm just describing my experience.
Right.
Because it's important to this conversation, right? And she fell in the water, and I got very upset about that, right? Looking back on it a year and a half later, I'm like, wow, I was such a fool in that moment. But it was not something I'd ever experienced before because I'd always been the DM. I could always have what I wanted, right?
Right.
If the character should be able to do this, then it happens.
The character should be able to do it.
Right. And, as a DM, you don't get pushback on that. As a player, if you think the character should be able to do something, you can make that argument.
Yes.
The DM might not agree with you. Right.
And
DMs...
at the end of the day, what the DM says typically goes.
Yeah.
Or at least at that period of time. Because you can also talk to a DM afterwards and say, I'm not really sure about this ruling, or, what can we do about this? And the DM, permitting, may think about it, or, may try to adjust how it
goes in the future or whatever. Yeah. So, but I mean, if you're used to being the DM, you need to be able to let go.
Yes, definitely.
Of that, in a way that I was not prepared for. I didn't expect it to be such a thing. Like, I knew it intellectually, but I never really experienced it that much before. Most of the other games I played in, where I was a player, they were mostly like in college. And a bunch of the players that I played with in college went on to be in the gaming industry. My other primary GM was Phil Brocato, who was pretty well known for being the line editor from Age of the Ascension, right?
Right.
So he like me, he was very deep role player. He wanted to do great scenes. He wanted to have his characters emoting. He wanted to recreate tropes. The great moment of the great moment at the end of the movie where they lightning and thunder, right? He was a theater geek.
Right.
And he wanted to recreate that experience at the table. And I was, also a theater geek. And so the two of us always got along very well on that level, right? So if I had my character do some outrageous cinematic thing,
he'd be all for it.
His response wasn't, okay, make a check for it. His response was, oh, yeah!
This is what happens.
Yeah, exactly. So like getting used to a different style and being able to let go of that.
Yeah. And every DM has their own different style of doing things, especially newer DMs who don't have a style may lean heavier on the dice. As like didn't have a style at the time. It was like my 4th or 5th session. Actually, I'd run further sessions before that, but it was like the 5th session of this new campaign. Yeah. And I didn't know what I was doing. And I leaned on the roll. So definitely I would have done things differently now, but that's learning.
Well, the only reason I bring it up is learning to trust the other DM when I'm used to being the DM.
Right.
When I'm used to the game going a certain way, when I'm used to certain unwritten rules, right? Or even interpreting written rules differently.
Right.
Well, I mean, I still do it a little bit now, but certainly for the first 6 or 7 months, I was sitting there sort of keeping track of all the things you were doing and looking like, I don't know, is that how it's supposed to go? Is that how I would have done it?
Were you making up a shit list?
Not a shit list, just like a critique, a running
Okay.
critique in my head.
Okay.
You know, I was armchair quarterbacking your DMing, right?
Right.
And occasionally, if I thought something was actually worth bringing up, I would bring it up to you after the fact, or here's a recommendation, here's a observation, here's some feedback. Usually I waited until you asked for it, but occasionally I would be like, hey, this was a thing, right? But as time has gone on, I've been making like a conscious decision to stop armchair quarterbacking the game and just play it, right?
Yeah.
But that has been a transition for me because
That's
being
hard.
used to being the DM, I'm used to thinking about how the game has gone, how the game is going, because I'm in charge of making the next one better if I can, right?
Right. I mean, you're it's used to being in control, and it's like that giving up the control completely and giving up, the you're the experienced one, and you've got this kind of it's just hard to get out of that mindset and to just relax and just enjoy yourself.
Yeah, and it is. The other thing is I'm used to being the center of the attention when I'm the DM. I'm used to being the guy in charge. So
you are the world.
I am the world. And so I made a character who's very big, very larger than life sort of personality. And that's me anyway. When I do play, I tend to play the face character, the loud, noisy person in charge.
It's either you or Sir Fox.
Yeah. And I mean I've always been like that. My current character is Shade of the Candle. She's so big in my mind that I'm like creating a whole new comic for her, right? And I've been writing stories and all this kind of stuff. But even so, at the table, I'm like, half the time, I'm like, no, I can't have Shady be in the center of attention here because somebody else needs a turn.
It is someone else's turn. It's someone else's go at bat.
Yep. And there are times where it's a sort of it's almost a meme among the D&D vlogosphere about the player who won't shut up and let somebody else have a turn, and I'm like, I don't want to be that guy.
I don't think you've made it to that point yet.
Well, thank you, I think. But I mean, that's where my instinct is to go, is to like almost be co-DM for the game, because I'm so used to being the DM all the time. I'm like, when you're running combat, I'm like, this monster has this mechanic, don't forget that, or whatever. And you're like, I don't need that assistance. I'm like, right, sorry, you don't. I'm just used to, wanting to facilitate play and keep things moving. I'm used to, when I'm the DM, what bothers me? Oh, well, I've forgotten a monster ability, or play is bogged down, or we're dithering about decisions or something, and I'm like trying to prevent those things from happening.
Which in some cases is acceptable. Like you want to help, but at the same time, it's like, well, what's troubling you or what's difficult for you as a DM may not be the same thing to another DM. Or
and that goes back to the difference in style too.
Yeah, there may be other ways as a player that you can lend to that as well, as opposed to doing DM things for the DM. There are player things that a player can do that would stop the group from dithering or help move things along. But that's switching from that DM mode to player mode.
Yeah. Well, like thinking of Shady as my playing piece. This is my interface with the world. What I have been trying to transition to is having her do things that I think will facilitate play.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm like, this is a quest hook that needs to be followed up on, and nobody else has. Okay, Shady will follow up on it, as opposed to some sort of OOC thing of, is nobody going to follow up on this? Well, I'm here.
You're there. You can follow up on it. That she is your place, your piece.
Yes.
Move her. So, being a player for a long time and trying to really get the feel for being a DM or being a new DM and having to get out of that player mindset into the DM mindset. And for me, one of the things that I really found was difficult in getting started as a DM was knowing where to start. Every time a session starts, the DM has to start it somewhere. You are at an inn, you are at a cave, you are just kind of climbing off of the boat. Where do you start it, and where do you go from there? Like, where do you start a session and make it be interesting enough, and just give the players enough where they can take off from there? Like, I'm used to, being the player and taking from other people, taking from the DM. It's like, okay, so I've come off the boat. I am in an inn.
Yeah.
What is my single piece?
You're all sitting around the tavern, and a mysterious stranger comes in. What do you do?
Right, and that's the DM's part. And as a player, we go off of that. But as a DM, it's like, well, I need to really come up with something at the start of every session. It's like the start of a new chapter. Every session is like the start of a new chapter, and where do you go from there? And I have had starts that just sucked. Like, to put it bluntly, like I've started the sessions and everyone has dithered the rest of the session, and it's primarily because, well, I didn't give you a good start. I didn't really get you off on the right foot, I feel. And as a DM, it's like you are the world, you are the narrator. They're just following what you're giving to them.
We getting back here again to the difference in DM styles too, right? So if you're used to a style of game where the DM tells you, it is this time of day, this time of year, you're in this place, and these are the things you can choose from, like making it very cut and dried. From the player's point of view, that's going to create, these are my options. I will pick one, right? And I know early on you mentioned particularly you were trying to do a more open-ended kind of.
I tried to. It didn't really work out.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think it had its good points and its bad points, but as you say, when you're a player, you're used to being given a setup,
mm-hmm.
And so when you're DMing, you either have to provide a setup or make it very clear to the players, setup is going to be your job. You tell me what's happening, and then I'll riff off of that.
Right.
And these go nowhere sessions that I've had them too.
Right.
And I think some of it is the players didn't get
what you were throwing out there.
Right. And am I frozen?
You were for a second there.
So the players didn't get that they were supposed to be driving the show.
Right. And that's a good point too. It's like one thing that I've been thinking of is like, as a DM, like you're told that you control the show, but at the same time, you really have to understand that the players run the show. Not too much. Like, you can't go and just say, yeah, go out and do whatever, and I'll just narrate it, because your players will never get anywhere. I've learned this several times early on. It's like I've just said, okay, we will have this be a full open-ended world. You can do whatever. Here's this and this and this and this. But then if you don't have the right kind of player, it doesn't go anywhere. Like, even if you have great plot hooks at area B or in C, you're relying too much on the players just going there.
And that is also,
it's good to have the players. You have to have them run the show. Like, they are the focus. You aren't, and your world is not. They are. But at the same time, you have to be kind of directing them subtle direction. You can't you say you go here, or you talk to this mysterious stranger. It's subtle. It's more subtle.
Well, I mean, it's kind of a back and forth. Instead of telling the players you go do X, you wave a sign that says interesting thing here, interesting thing over here, interesting thing over here. But you have to be prepared that they may ignore all of those signs.
They may ignore just a random set piece that was just there, and they will chase that set piece, and suddenly for 2 hours they are trying to sneak aboard a ship.
Yeah.
That has nothing to do with anything that you get prepared for the evening.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's why they always talk about improv being such a key DM skills, because whenever you think the players are going to zig, they always zag. Sometimes you think they're going to zig or zag, and they start doing a polka. Just players are crazy. But again, some of this is also group style. You mentioned having the right kind of player, like that group in Richmond I talk about, the group in college that I talk about. I never prepared anything for them. I had like a catalog of enemy stats that I could pull from on a moment's notice, and I knew like the layout of the city and the factions of the city like all in my head, and they would go do stuff. That was their thing. That was exactly the kind of game that you were describing, trying to create.
Yes.
Yeah. And some of that was Phil, the big drama club guy. And a lot of the other players were very similar. They were just, I've always wanted to be this, and I'm going to go do that. And so I had
just
to do
did it. You just had to make sure they had that ability, that had that there for them.
But our current group is not like that.
They are not like that.
And it's not a good or bad thing. It's just
like there's different, just like there's different DM styles, there are different player styles. We're not going to go into that this time, but it's definitely having to understand who your players are. Like as a DM, you have to understand what kind of players you have, and to go off of that. Like when you're a player, it's like you're just one of them. You are just one of the. Yeah. You're just one of the styles that the DM has to prepare for. But as a player, it's like you have to really consider, okay, I have 2 quiet people who will pretty much just follow the entire group. One person who will probably be the person sneaking ahead, prepared to kill anything that you run across. Another person who's probably going to be digging into every little thing. And so you have to be prepared for those styles. I'm still learning to do that. It's definitely a different lesson in how this all works. But you have to have a bit of, when you have a group that has all the different styles, you have to learn to have a little bit of everything. You have, it has to be a little bit of jack of all trades in all of your campaigns, and you have to learn, okay, so I am this style of player. I am the role player. I will probably talk to any NPC that you throw at me. I'll probably also try and do the stupid things, but I also have to think about we have other people who do more stupid things than I do. But you also have to consider, but what you have to get out of your head and get out of what your style is and think about the styles of other people, because like I said, it's not just you. It's not just your world. It is your players. And
it's not just the other players who match your style. I mean, I'm the role player too, right? So if you put the 2 of us in a room and the rest of the group wasn't there, we could just
role play back and forth the entire world.
Yeah. Probably never roll a die, but have all kinds of cool adventures, But on the other hand, somebody like Lee, who is the type of player that I generally refer to as the audience.
Yes.
Right. And again, that's not a dig; it's just a description.
No.
He likes to enjoy seeing other people interact and occasionally toss in his little curveball.
He's there to enjoy the game. He's there to just. Yeah. He may not interact much, but he's there to enjoy it. And for those kind of players, I mean, it's relatively easier to appease them, but at the same time, you still have to give them things. Like even though they're not going to really go out and grab something, you still need to consider. Okay, so this player hasn't contributed much to the campaign today. What can I give to just spark them a little bit? So, which is why I had to actually go and say, okay, this style of DMing that I'm trying to do isn't working because I have 2 or 3. I have 2 players who are audience.
2 audience. 1 disruptor, 1 role player, and Surfy and Plotline have multiple.
Depending on the day, they'll take a different role. So, like I said, you have to think about the entire way, and you also have to get used to being in the spotlight. You definitely have to be getting used to being the person that everyone is focused on. And oh my gosh, that is, if I wasn't an actor or voice actor to begin with, and sort of used to being in the spotlight of these things, that would be so terrifying. Like I can understand why some people can never get the idea of DMing in their head, is because you are the face, you are the world that they are focusing on. They are listening to your words and deciding how to mess up your entire world based off of what you're saying. It's a little intimidating.
Whether they want to mess it up, which some players do, or they want to do their thing and they messing it up as an unintended consequence.
Yes.
Messing it up always happens.
It's just going to happen.
Yeah. But, thinking about the different style of players around the table, from the former DM now player point of view, right? I'm not used to. I'm used to like accommodating all these different types, right? Mm-hmm. And again, what I was talking before about like wanting to co-GM, like wanting to help out. I'm like, okay, so what can I do to give Laurie a moment? What can I do to, and instead of sitting here thinking about my own character, which is what primarily I should be doing, but it's not the skill that I've learned, right? I'm like overdoing. It's good to like try to integrate with the other players.
That's good to try and help because you are still helping the DM a little bit by trying to integrate the other players, and it's good to try and pull the other players out of their shell. And the DM should be, really be encouraging that sort of player interaction and you gotta accept the help in some ways.
Yeah.
Like, your players want to help you. Your players are not against you.
Yeah.
And at the same time, the players are not against the DM, and the DM's not against the players. I lost my train of thought, which.
Yeah. Well, that's another topic actually that I did want to bring up, but we'll come back to that. But as like a player, I'm like learning to focus on Shady, on my character,
on you.
Yeah,
on your character
more than the group.
You should.
As a DM, you watch the group. As a player, you watch yourself and your character.
I mean,
and then connect with the group.
Yeah, I mean, you should still pay attention to the group, like, and even if just not to the same degree as the DM, but you should still.
It's a matter of focus,
right? It's a matter of narrowing the focus down to your player, your set piece, as opposed to the DMs. Like, you need to widen that out. When you're going from the player to the DM, you have to look at the entire board.
Yeah. No, but something you mentioned just now about the like having everybody looking at you and trying to identify everything else. You mentioned at the beginning ADHD.
Yes.
Right.
I am very.
I also have ADHD, and the two of us, it affects the two of us as DMs in very different ways. For me, the ADHD has sort of become a superpower because I can bounce from focus on this character, focus on that character, instead of being on one thing. But as a player, it actually, after a while, I'm like, I want something new to happen, or I want to get on to the next thing.
You need that interaction. You need that dopamine, the extra excitement.
And especially with a large group, I have to wait for 5 other players to get their moment, and then the monsters to get the moment, and then I get to act again. and I have trouble holding that focus as a player.
Whereas in my case, when I am the DM, I will start talking about something and start talking about the world, and suddenly I will lose my thread just as I'm talking, and it's gone.
Yeah.
And it's like,
Or
I don't know what I was doing for you anymore because it's just gone.
Yeah. Or the other thing I've noticed a couple times, and you've called us out on it, is you're talking to Lee, to pick on him, and I start doing a little side RP with Surfy, and you get interested in what me and Surfy are doing and forget about what talking to Lee.
So
right?
whenever someone is, so my biggest problem with DMing is that I'm trying to narrate the world, and as other people are talking in my ear, my brain starts trying to listen to what you're saying, and it starts shifting slowly towards paying attention to that when I should be paying attention to here. So
yeah,
DMing at ADHD, it's weird.
It is weird. So my particular, like, the discipline I have used for that is thinking of things like being on a camera on a TV show, right? And when I, as the GM, am looking at you, the player, that means the camera is on you.
Yes.
Right. And
that's harder in this place, though. That's like, we're doing a lot of our DMing online, and we always did DMing online because we're like 300 miles away. But it's difficult to just look at a player because you don't have that really focus.
Well, online currently we've got the 6 people doing the Brady Bunch thing, and that makes it a little more difficult. But so my point is if I hear stuff going on over there, right? If Surfy and Plots start doing their own thing, right? Whereas I'm still talking to you and your character, I think that's off camera. It doesn't matter until the camera is shining on it. So they can do whatever they want. They can chat, they can chat about the game, they can chat about not the game. The only thing of it is if I can't hear who I'm talking to.
And that does happen sometimes. Sometimes you just have to say, hey, you guys are way too loud.
Yeah.
Just tone it down a little bit. But that's hard to do in an online setting as well, because we're all one volume, as opposed to, if we were in one room, it's like you could talk quietly in a corner where the DM is, still DMing.
Yeah, and I have occasionally done side channels.
Yes.
For if I wanted to, I had Shady and Plotline's character have a conversation that was not, it didn't have anything to do with what you were doing as the DM, and I didn't want to be disruptive, so he and I just sort of did it off on a side channel. Right. And that worked. And also I've done that as a DM where, most of the group is discussing some, what does the weird statue mean? And is this a trap? And are we going to get around it? While you guys are talking about that, the other player is off in another room or doing some other thing. And so I'm off on a side channel with that player resolving that, and I'm not paying attention to what you guys are talking about. And it can be a challenge, but it also
is definitely But that's definitely a good way to keep things separate. And it's as a player and a DM, that's definitely another tool to have. Between a DM and a player, though, whose world really is it? like the DM. Is it the DMs who's controlling everything else other than the players, or is it the players who are living in that world? And how do you really switch between being a player and a DM and changing your understanding of the world?
Well, I mean, you and I are in kind of a weird place about this particular topic because you set your campaign in a corner of my campaign world.
And
right?
I'm trying
So,
not to interfere with your side of the world, and you're trying to not interfere with my side of the world.
yeah, we're trying to sort of mutually support each other by, making references to stuff going on in the other campaign without it being a game breaker or, without forcing the other person's hand. Like, so, you have a big bad dragon villain floating around in your campaign that I know nothing about except the name, right?
Yes. And
And
that
I
you
know
and
that
that
there's
you've killed his daughter.
yeah.
Good
Well, I
job.
know that it's yeah. Well, she started it, but the point is, um, I know that the dragon is big and bad, and I seem to recall it's a black dragon.
Yes.
I think we got definite.
Yes, you got that. Well, I mean, his daughter was a black dragon, so apparently he's a black dragon.
Yeah. Well, see that right there, we're looking at a piece of world lore. With me as the DM in that world, it doesn't necessarily follow that a black dragon gives birth to another black dragon. They probably do, but they don't necessarily do.
They probably should.
Right?
Yeah, it might be. We don't know.
But
that's the limit of what you know as a player, and as a DM, I know everything that's going on with that. I know who that black dragon is. I know what they're doing. I know the terrible things that they're plotting that you have no idea what they're going on about.
Yeah. But with that limited information that I had, over in my game, I had one of the other big bad dragons name drop your big bad dragon.
Yes.
Just as a little flourish, right? To just sort of drive home these games are in the same world.
They are connected.
Right. And so right now in my game we're doing Tomb of Annihilation, and spoiler alert for anybody who's never played Tomb of Annihilation, there's a horrible curse that's making everybody die.
Everyone who has died before is dying again.
Yes.
Slowly and agonizingly.
Yes.
Spoilers.
Yep. So in your game, you're just getting to the point where that's going to start affecting the world.
Yeah.
So as a player, I'm real excited to see what is Blitzy going to do with this something, whether you have anything or not.
I don't know what I'm going to do with this. You think I'm doing? You think I know what I'm doing?
I think
our tagline is we don't know what we're doing.
Yeah, I know. I get that. But I also know that you will think of something eventually. I have faith in that. So I'm really jazzed about that. But for just the purposes of a campaign, assuming that, not talking about a shared world campaign, because that's a whole other video, right? But you gave us a little brief outline of Everkeep and its connection to Humblewood and the stuff around it. And I was all excited, so I was like, okay, I'll draw you a map, and I'll put, you had all these cities, and I put them all in there for you, and then the second or third session in, you described something where it was like, there's no one on this map that this could really fit.
So we had to reconfigure it a little bit.
Yeah, but the thing of it is, you're saying, whose world is it anyway? It's like, well, it's not my world, even though I drew the map.
Right. Well, in your position, you are the player, and you are playing in the world that I created, or my corner of the world that I created, and that world changes based off of my whim, basically, or what I feel like doing today.
Yeah. And then, but then also you created, you gave us some of the power structures and the important temples in town and things like that. And then I wrote this backstory for Shady that didn't reference any of it. Right. I gave her this rival in the form of Cardinal Moraldo, where I was like, if Blitzy wants to take this character and do cool things with it, that's great. If he doesn't, it doesn't really matter, because it's Shady's backstory. It's not the game we're playing now. Right. It informs her decisions, what she's doing right now, but it's not like I didn't predict her future with it. I described her past with it. Right. There's sometimes a temptation for people, especially who are the role player archetype, which is me, to want to create characters with a great destiny, right?
Yes.
I have a character that I always wanted to play who was the exiled prince of a neighboring country, and the story would be him building up an army and going to retake his country. Right?
Which is, that's a fun plot line.
It is a fun plot line, but it's also, at that point, whose world is it?
Well,
right?
I mean, it's in that case, it's depends, like how much you really want it to happen at the same time, but it's not just your world. It's also the other players. Like the DM is probably a part of that, but the DM is like another player in terms of where the plot goes. You still have, in our case, 5 other people to contend and build the world with. So while it's not just the DM's world, it's the player's world, but every player has a chunk of that world, and to craft it based off of both their backstory and whatever they do. And the DM, like I said, is just another chunk. It's just another player, but that player just happens to be the entire background of the world that the players are influencing and moving.
Yeah.
So both. But yeah.
Well, anyway.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much all as the extent. We've gone through pretty much everything we've had to talk about today. That doesn't segue into the ending very well.
It doesn't segue into the ending very well, but who cares? We don't know what we're doing.
We don't know what we're doing.
We really don't.
But next time, if there is next time, things.
What I was thinking.
Yeah,
what I was thinking is we could toss out some suggested potential topics and have like the viewers, assuming there are any,
please
what
watch to the end of this video.
Yes. What they would like to talk about. And I came up with 3 ideas.
I didn't put any down. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I didn't know I was supposed to.
That's okay. I was just
I'm pretty sure we've talked about these as subjects together, but yes.
Yeah. So some possible topics include reskinning.
Now, are you talking like reskinning races, characters, classes?
Yeah. Well, what I'm specifically thinking about is like the Tulok the Barbarian videos where he's turning druid spells into Batman's Batarang. Right. That kind of reskinning of figuring out what effect you want to have in the world, and then thinking backward to what mechanic supports it and what you can reflavor and the ins and outs of that.
We just did that when I was trying to come up with a new character for a kobold, and I didn't really like Volo's kobold. You said, well, what do you want out of it? And we decided, let's take a Lightfoot halfling and give it dark vision and something else, and you pretty much have a kobold.
Yep. So that's reskinning as an idea. We could talk about that.
Mm-hmm.
There's the ins and outs of remote playing,
which we've been doing a lot of. We've
always
been doing remote playing. When we started, we had several of them in Nisha's kitchen, playing on their
table. A table with a webcam pointed at it.
Yep.
And then we had half the group on monitors.
And then the other half of us were just in the interwebs. And now with COVID, everyone is in the interwebs. We're all just squares talking to each other.
Pretty much, yeah.
But we'll talk about remote playing and how that can be used going forward.
And the other thing is just our sort of perennial favorite thing is furry D&D. I play a tabaxi. He's got a griffin. So.
I played a griffin, and now I currently play a cat thing.
Shifter.
And now I'm going into a kobold. So I don't play humans. I played a halfling once, and I was really bored with it.
Well, it was a gnome, right?
Yeah, it was a gnome. I didn't even remember what he was. So we definitely have a lot of experience in playing anthropomorphic creatures and getting them how they work in your campaign and how they work in general. So that's another thing we can talk about. But if you have any other ideas, or if any of our friends or people who follow us who've gotten this far,
Yep.
Have anything that you want us to talk about and pick our brains a little bit for about we've been going for about 50 minutes. I'm not sure if, for however long this is actually clipped down
45 minutes to an hour-ish. Yeah, we're gonna edit it down a little bit, but yeah.
But yeah,
I mean, I was looking at having an in-depth discussion without just going forever. So,
which we can.
Yeah. We really could.
We could.
I mean, we are such big nerds with just blah, 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 all day long.
But yeah, throw it at us, and we'll talk about it for however long we can.
It wouldn't be an online video without saying, please like and subscribe. So I'm going to go ahead and do that and get that out of the way.
The like button is down there. Subscribe button is also down there.
Yeah.
Assuming we're using YouTube, they're just down there.
Yeah.
Just click.
And assuming that you're on that side and I'm on this side.
Yeah, we might be flipped by the time that we actually
the Chrome
get to
is
this.
Around here somewhere.
And if you're totally done with this, the X button is probably up there.
Yeah, probably so. There's a stop button. There's an unlike button there. All right, we're gonna go.
We're gonna get out of here, else we're just gonna keep talking for the rest of the night. Good night.
Thanks
Stay
for
geeky.
watching. Yep. Okay, I have no idea what you're going on about, but okay.
I mean, that is the story of my life.
Hey, it's all right. Kind of lost the thread of where I was going.
We might cut that part out.
Okay.